watching the meeting via the webcast. To the members of public in the gallery, I would like to remind you that this planning meeting is being broadcast live over the internet, so there is no need for any other filming of the meeting to take place. This meeting is available to view online now and in the future. Committee members, please be aware that we are all on camera and you may be visible on screen when people around you are speaking, and please remember to speak clearly into your microphones. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at meetings. I have had no request for people to speak Welsh today, so this meeting will be conducted in English only. Please can all mobile phones and other noisy devices be put on silent. If there is an emergency alarm, please follow the green signs and go to the ground floor of the Civic car park. Thank you. I'll ask all the officers now to introduce themselves, and we'll start with you, Polly, and work across. Thank you.
I'm Polly Ellis, I'm a solicitor with the council.
Rachel Beale, I work in Democratic Services.
Hello, Richard Lewis, Head of Planning and Development.
Paul Wheeldon, I'm Group Leader, Highway Development Control.
Scott Jenkins, Planning Officer.
Rebecca McAndrew, Principal Planner, Development Management.
Norman Jones, Team Leader, Applications Development Management.
Thank you. We got one other one, but I don't think he's on camera. Do you want to introduce yourself? No? All right, Chris. We'll start the agenda. Attendance, if everyone would sign the register as usual. And any apologies? Any apologies, Rachel?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillors Bevan and Marson. Thanks.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. So, Polly Ellis, could you explain to the members? Thank you.
Firstly, I'd remind members that you need to complete the declaration of interest form in the attendance register folder if you're declaring an interest in any of the applications. The following interests have been declared to me prior to the meeting. Councillor Stuart Ashley declares a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 7, land at Addit Walk, Pont Newydd, Cwmbran Torfaen, as a member of Cwmbran Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. Councillor Faye Jones declares a personal non-prejudicial interest, again in agenda item 7, as a member of Cwmbran Community Council, which has been consulted on the application. And Councillor Janet Jones declares a personal non-prejudicial interest in agenda item 8, New Road Farm Varteg Road Blenavon, as a member of Blenavon Town Council, which has been consulted on the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. Item 3, draft amended minutes of Planning Committee of the 19th of December 2017. It's been brought to my attention that a member of the public has commented that there is an error in the minutes of the December Planning Committee. The member of the public has commented that on page 12 of the December minutes, the wording as follows: the inspector gave the responsibility of approving the materials back to the local authority. She must have felt confident that the materials proved would be suitable, but it should have read, surely by giving the responsibility for approving materials back to the local authority, she felt confident that it would be down to people like yourselves, members of the Planning Committee, with a local community close to your hearts and sensitive to and respectful of the needs of that locality, to make the final decision as to the suitability of the materials chosen. The Chief Planning Officer has reviewed the webcast and has advised that an amendment is required for clarification. Can the committee agree to amend the minutes as requested? Now, that's item 3 on your agenda. And it's on page 6 of those minutes, about 2/3 down, can you see? Does the committee approve of the recommendations now I've read out, that those are included? Can I have a show of hands? Right, that's unanimous. Thank you. Yes, Stuart?
I've just reflected on the fact that when we were doing declarations of interest, and I've got some minutes here now, Ardwick Walk is not in Pontnewid. I'm Pontnewid councillor. It's in West Pontnewid, so it's actually wrong on the minutes. It's a moot point, but it's West Pontnewid, not Pontnewid.
Right, okay, I'll look at Polly now too. Okay? Yes, that's okay, Stuart.
Different place.
Thank you for agreeing to the change in the minutes. We go to item 4, and I find my list. No, that's not my list. Oops. That's it. Item 4 of the planning meeting, 23rd of January 2018, and it's on pages 13 to 20. Right. Have you all read the minutes? Are they accurate? Yes, move it. Is there a seconder? Right. Do you all approve of that? Hands, please. Thank you. Are there any questions? You're allowed to ask questions. No? Thank you. Item 5, All Wales Annual Performance Report. I expect you've all read it. It's a very interesting report. Over to Richard. I think he'll say a couple of words, but he's not going to go through it.
Just letting members know, we submit our performance statistics every quarter to Welsh Government, and we're also required to produce an annual performance report each year, which we have done. That was presented to the Planning Committee on the 21st of November. This report in front of you is Welsh Government's report, taking account of all the annual reports submitted by the authorities. They've put them together in an All Wales Performance Report. Probably, it's just for your information, but in terms of the performance of Torfaen in context with other local authorities, page 83, there's a table in 83 that summarises that. And as I say, it's just for members to note. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Do members agree to note the report? Is there a seconder? Show of hands. Thank you very much. The report is noted. Agenda item 6, planning appeal, and it's regarding knockdown front garden wall to allow for parking at 113 the Highway New Inn, Pontypool. You've probably all read it. The decision is this appeal was dismissed and the Council's decision to refuse planning permission for the development was upheld. Committee note it? All agree to note it? Thank you. Item 7, planning application 16/P/01324, proposed development of 9 dwellings, upgrading of public open space and associated work at land at Addit Walk, Pontnewydd, Cwmbran. It's on pages 89 to 114. There were 2 site visits, one on November the 8th last year and another one on the 9th of January this year. I think Polly would like to say something about this before we start. Thank you, Polly.
If I can just draw members' attention to the second paragraph of the section entitled Background. And if I can just remind members that a Town and Village Green application has been made in respect to the land which is the subject of this application. The fact that a Town and Village Green application has been made does not prevent the Planning Committee from making a decision on the planning application, as a Town and Village Green application is considered under separate legislation and separate procedures. And just to remind members that the planning application is to be considered on its planning merits alone.
Thank you, Polly. Scott Jenkins, now the planner, is going to give us a presentation, and we have speakers on this, but that'll be after the presentation. Thank you, Scott.
Okay, thank you, Chair. This is a full planning application submitted by Bronavon for the construction of 9 dwellings and the upgrading of public open space. As you can see from the photos, the site currently comprises grassland, which is used for informal recreation from the local residents. Within the site, the pedestrian link and a cluster of mature trees are centrally located, which is considered to visually separate the site into 2 land parcels. You can see the alignment of the path and the cluster of trees to the top photo, and then the southern land parcel and the northern in the photos below. So in regards to the housing element, this is to be located in the northern section of the site and comprise 4 one-bedroom flats, 4 2-bed houses and 1 3-bed house. There's proposed to be 14 designated on-site car parking spaces, and the scheme also seeks to widen Channel View and Addis Walk to 5.5 metres in width, and also increase the depth of the existing car parking bays by 1 metre. As you can see from these elevations, the proposed dwellings are 2 storeys in height and considered to relate well in terms of the existing residential context. So in regards to the landscaping works, these are to be located in the southern sort of section of the site on the right hand side. This is to comprise the introduction of a hedgerow along the northern boundary, as you can see, low earth mound feature, associated planting, some landscape features in terms of boulders and 2 benches. The scheme is considered to be on balance policy compliant and therefore recommended for approval subject to conditions.
Longer than that. Right, we've got speakers. An objector, first of all. Richard Todd, would you like to come down? Yes. When you're ready, Mr. Todd. Please sit down if you want to.
No, I prefer to stand.
Okay, then you've got 5 minutes and Polly will time you, okay?
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Richard Todd and I live at Addit Walk. My house is directly opposite the green and I'm here to speak on behalf of the residents surrounding the area where the proposed properties are to be built. Last year I collected 50 plus signatures from residents who strongly object to 9 homes being built on this small area of green, which has been a playing field for over 40 years. The green is used for dog walkers, children, and a children's play area which is safe and where parents can keep an eye on them. It is also acts as an oasis in an increasingly busy environment and a buffer between the houses and the main road. Also last year, I contacted the Argus newspaper and they published a photograph of local objectors on the green and an article emphasising the strong public opinion that our village green was to disappear. And the shock that 9 homes were to be crammed on such a small area. Copies of this are in the chamber. We have also been in contact with our local councillors and the Assembly member for Torvine, and they support us in our objections. Across from the green on Mendy Way is the Yew Tree pub, which has been empty for over 3 years, and adjacent to that is a row of shops, which are vital to the local community. This site will be a prime location for redevelopment of shops, with flats above and converting the pub into flats, as well as meet the need for the local social housing. And parking is already available. It could also help to reduce the antisocial behaviour which happens quite frequently around this existing area. Surely there are larger spaces which could be used instead of cramming 9 homes on such a small piece of land, where the new residents would have more parking facilities than the people who have lived in the area for a number of years. We feel very strongly about this application, and it would not only affect the environment and with increased traffic and pollution, it could also adversely affect the property values for residents who own their own homes. We therefore ask you to take into consideration our views and objections and consider refusing planning on our village green. Are there any questions?
I'm sorry, you can't ask questions at this point.
Pardon?
You can't ask questions at this
You don't
point.
want anybody to ask me any questions?
They are not allowed to
They're not
ask
allowed.
you questions,
That's-
Mr.
I complete
Todd.
my
So thank you very
speech.
much.
Thank you.
And if you go back to your seat, and I'll call Mrs. Carol Jacobs down. Right, Carol, when you're ready, please sit down. I know you've done this before, so you know what to do. No, it's the grey patch on the bottom you press. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Polly will
Thank you.
time you for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Madam Chairman, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of Torvine Friends of the Earth in this matter. We were approached by the residents of Addit Walk last autumn for advice and assistance in their battle to keep the green space at Addit Walk for the continued benefit of residents. This is an area very familiar to me, and have known friends whose children played here and where they exercised their dog. In later life, the children left home, 2 of them to join the Royal Air Force, where they have served for over 25 years. It has never been a question in my mind that this is useful, valued green space, designed originally by the developers of the housing estate for the health and welfare benefits of its residents, and to enable the community activity. Torvine Friends of the Earth held a very successful stall at one of the community events a few years ago. It was one of the best responses we had in all the activities we take place. Since the transfer of the council's housing stock to the Housing Association Bron Avon, this is now being challenged by them to provide dwellings. This application follows many others across Torvine where this housing association holds property rights. Given that the existing residential communities were for social housing, it bothers me greatly that a social housing provider would want to take from Peter to pay Paul in this lottery of land use. Recently, Torvine Friends of the Earth engaged with the help of council officers in nitrogen dioxide monitoring in the borough. Sadly, we didn't do Mendy Way. I know that this main feeder route from North Cwmbran southwards to town centre and on to Newport has never had an air quality monitoring exercise carried out. This is an observation and not a criticism of the council's officers, for whom I have a lot of respect. However, through the process, I learned a lot. For instance, that particulate matter is best captured by roadside hedgerows. This is the only bit of the planning application I find attractive. Also, that tree overhang can actually hold it down and not help to disperse it. Open green space, however, can do it. The necessary traffic calming measures of this long road slow down traffic and hold it up at various waiting points. This increases discharge of noxious fumes from idling engines, especially from diesel engines such as that of buses, lorries and some cars. Approaching this area from Upper Cwmbran and from Bryn Celyn Road, it is a welcome sight to encounter this green open vista within this long straight road encased by housing on each side. On one side of Maindy Way, the houses are high above the road. On the opposite side, they are below road level, levelling out at Addit Walk, where there is a welcome open green space, serving not only the residents for a place where older children can enjoy unstructured, open and imaginative play, unsupervised yet overseen by their parents, but for the wider benefit of all who encounter it, providing a cordon sanitaire. Building on a large part of this land will destroy the pleasant street scene available to all. The provision of a children's play area will only serve the very young, leaving older children little option and force them to wander further out of sight to find a suitable alternative. The sports pitches at the end of Maindy Way are for the use of the club and are enclosed. The areas beyond the sports field are a long way out of sight from Addit Walk and neighbouring streets. It is uneven and boggy. I am not even sure if it is stable, as I know that some properties at this end have had to be shored up. There is no report of alternative sites being subject to comparison analysis, and the Upper Cwmbran ward has been singled out as having an over-provision of recreational space. I can understand an assessment reaching a conclusion of under-provision, but how can you have too much of a good thing? This development has been assessed as fulfilling the requirements of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. I beg to differ, inasmuch as it reduces valuable urban green space for the health and well-being of children, increases traffic and brings it closer to people's homes, blocks the access to natural light, and increases the level of people's anxiety about potential loss of their environment. Does not fulfil the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child to be heard. When do you ever hear of children being consulted in a planning application? Yes, there is a need for houses.
Sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. The 5 minutes has expired.
I'm sorry, I've got one paragraph. Can I finish, please?
Is that your discretion? No, the 5 minutes has expired.
No, the legal advisor says 5 minutes is up, and I'm sorry about that, Mrs. Jacobs. But,
Right, thank you.
we have to stick to our rules. We have another speaker, the agent, Robin Williams. Would you like to come down now, Mr. Williams? Right, Mr. Williams, you have 5 minutes, and Polly will time you.
I'll be under 5 minutes.
Right, okay then, thank you.
I'm Chairman and the members of Planning Committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I have 5 comments to make in support of the application. The site lies within an established settlement limit as defined in the LDP. It is not protected by any direct designation and therefore represents a windfall site that can contribute to the significant housing land shortfall in the county, which currently stands at 3.6 years. It is appreciated that the local residents have objected to the proposal on the grounds of loss of informal recreation space, whilst the site is not allocated directly for public open space. It is acknowledged that the site is afforded indirect protection through policy CF5. In accordance with that policy, a public open space assessment has been completed in accordance with the criteria set out in that policy and has been submitted to accompany and support the planning application. The assessment concludes that there is an over-provision of public open space within the ward. These conclusions are not disputed by your officers. Chairman, only a third of the public open space within this site is being proposed for housing. The remaining two-thirds of the site is being retained as public open space, with Broaven undertaking significant upgrading works costing around £30,000. The works will improve the overall integrity and usability of the site. Chair, all existing trees are to be retained as part of the landscaping scheme. This is a 100% affordable housing scheme. There are currently 2,624 persons on the housing register in Torfaen. 33% of the housing register, those people on the register, have chosen Upper Cwmbran and West Pont Newydd as their preferred location. The proposed development, therefore, meets a significantly known identified need. With regard to the concerns that the proposal constitutes overdevelopment of the site, I just confirm that the construction of 9 dwellings on the site equates to a density of 13 dwellings per hectare. This is well below the norm of circa 30 to 35 dwellings per hectare, which usually is in front of you as Planning Committee. In conclusion, there are no overriding reasons to justify the refusing of this application. The proposal represents an appropriate form of development which reflects the existing residential character of the area and known local housing need. The benefits of the proposal outweigh the need to protect the third of the site for open space. There is a need for a significant amount of affordable housing. I can therefore confirm that all material considerations have been adequately addressed by the proposal, and I would ask the committee to give this application favourable consideration in accordance with your officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. I'll wait for you to get back to your seat, and then I'll invite the committee to ask their questions. Right, we'll open to the floor now. Any questions, comments? Steve?
On the first part of the development, I did ask for an open space assessment because I wasn't happy with the open space assessment given, because one of the fields that was in question is now run by a football club and it's not for public use. That was the first thing. If I can ask a couple of questions. In number 7, Added Walk, is the main drainage going through that property? Because if it is, the resident has not given any scope for it to come to her house and be done. She does not want it done to her house at all. She was approached and asked if she could knock a wall down and her rear garage doors, and she refused. They asked her to come into the house, and she refused totally. So, could somebody come back to me on that as well?
Who would like to answer that, Scott?
So, in regards to the open space assessment, the Birches football fields, I spoke to the planning policy and implementation section who reviewed the assessment that was provided by the applicants. They confirmed that the football fields themselves have been excluded from the quantum of open space in the area because it fell under formal recreational space. So there is a slither of land to the north of that which constitutes informal, which has been included. But any kind of formalised land such as the football fields have been excluded from this assessment.
But also, they've put into the open space assessment ones up in Thornhill, which nobody uses because the risk assessment is not safe and viable to leave children there to play. So there's other ones round the ward. There's not that much in the ward, but it's further on other parts of the ward, which is not acceptable.
The only thing I just highlight there really, the applicants provided us with an open space assessment that was done on a ward basis. That included the Thornhill site. In addition to that, our policy implementation section have also done it on a localised basis, which is a 400-metre radius from the site. That excludes the Thornhill site. And even on that localised basis, it's been considered that there's an over-provision of informal recreational space to serve the population in that area. In regards to the drainage aspect, I'm aware that there's a sort of a drainage, an existing drain which runs along the kind of northern section of the site. In terms of any further drainage schemes or strategies, that's been reserved via condition. The drainage officer's commented saying that he doesn't want any surface water drainage exceeding what's currently there on site, but other than that, any sort of strategy has been reserved at the moment.
An assessment was done, and the resident was approached about the people doing the assessment, that they were proposing to knock her rear wall down and her back gate or doors, and to dig up her back. Now, she's refused any response to that, and wouldn't let the person in the door. So, it's not acceptable that this person doesn't want that to happen in their property, which is privately owned.
I think it's probably just worth saying, in terms of drainage, it would be covered by a condition. The developer would need to, there may be several ways of providing drainage to the site, but he would have to satisfy our drainage officers that it was possible to drain the site satisfactorily. So they will have to look, if that's one alternative, they may need to look at other options of providing drainage.
Okay, Steve? Yeah. Right. Alan?
Thank you, Chair. Whilst quantitatively there may be an over-provision of open space, it doesn't say anything about the quality and the location of these open spaces. This particular space, my fear is, it's right in the heart of the West Pontywood community. Other open spaces are on the periphery, and I'm sure the residents would have no problem developing there, but this particular site is in the heart of the community, and it is opposite a rundown derelict site also owned by Bronavon. So I think the quality of this site is being overlooked somewhat. In the report, on page 103, it's considered that lost space, whilst valued, is not a significant loss. Well, I don't believe that. I believe this is a significant loss to the community, as evidenced by our objectors and former and current councillors. So I'll just leave it at that, really.
Richard's going to answer that first.
No, I'm just going to say it is a balance. We've looked at this. The affordable housing is a benefit. There's going to be an upgrading of another open space. But ultimately, you are right, it is a balance as to whether it should be lost or not, and that's something that members need to consider.
Okay, Janet.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We spent hours in Council this morning discussing the benefits and well-being of bringing up our children in a healthy green environment. Yet another loss of open green spaces is surely going to have a detrimental effect on the children of this area of Cwmbran. I think it's really sad that that it's coming to this all the time.
Anybody want to answer that? There was more of a comment than a question. Yeah. Stuart, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, I've read what the landscape officers said, and also, I mean, I know the area reasonably well as well, because the green you've got there that my colleague said about the former Yew Tree pub, the shopping centre, and the green, they form a whole. And there's not any account being taken of the fact that they actually integrate with the green, the old pub site and the shopping centre, which was part of the insight of the development of Cwmbran Newtown. The other green sites on there, we're looking at integrated green areas, was a former tip area. And in fact, you will, if you go down there, because I've been down there, the Council's Environment Officer, there's actually orchids beyond. So we've actually got very, very different types of areas, and then nothing whatsoever to do with it. So, I mean, in fact, you can walk down through Springville and actually come up by the community farm. Very, very different sorts of sites. Now, we're taking all this into account because it's incredibly different sorts of sites. You've also got, if anybody ever works with young children and defensible areas, that sort of area, if you look at it, is housing which you can look over with young children playing. It's that sort of quality to it. And it's very similar to other areas that we've discussed in this committee before. And it strikes me, if you're looking at like for like, and we're talking about quality of sorts of areas that, you know, are we actually linking this up? Because I've read what was said on here, and it strikes me that it's not like for like. We've got an area which is a very distinct green, and I'm actually the school governor, council school governor on one of the school in that area, and you know that is a well-used area, and it's used for informal play. And I was hearing what people have said, you know, that's an area that's used for a lot of things. So you don't get young people so much these days out because obviously the filthiness. Now, have we done studies into the other areas for us to think that we can actually lose this area? Because I can't think of any other areas in this area where it's used in the same way as this particular piece of green. I'd like to hear your views on that.
Scott, answer.
Yeah, I'd say that at this current point in time, the application's been assessed in terms of what the planning designations are currently. The site hasn't been allocated as an important urban open space in the adopted plan. But we have afforded it protection under the policies under CF5. In terms of reviewing that and going forward with it, I know that as part of the LDP review, that's something that's going to be looked at in terms of assessing these different areas and going through that kind of process at that stage. But this application has been assessed on the current adopted plan status, really.
Where are the other? I mean, ask the question about if you've looked at this area and you've made an assessment. Where are the other linkages in terms of environment?
I mean, the spaces that have been assessed as part of the open space assessment, I don't think there's any clear linkage between any of them. They're all sort of dotted around the ward. So if they fall under the certain informal recreation sort of characteristics, then they've been included within the assessment. If they fall under formal recreation space, they've been excluded, and all the other kind of categories of space as well. So I don't think there's any clear linkages between these sites. They are sort of dotted within the ward, and we've just sort of used our policy status, really, or our policy within this document to evaluate it, really.
So this is actually the biggest piece of green area in the whole of the ward, isn't it? Other than stuff that surrounds it, where we've got the sports field and you've got the rough field that goes down over to Springville.
I mean, yeah, in terms of the open space assessment, it is a larger space in the ward, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Stuart. Come in, Richard. No. Jason, next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I found myself on the fence on this one, to be honest. There's a lot of good arguments, and I'd certainly thank Mr Todd for his statement. I think that was really useful. As he was talking, I'm looking to find reasons to turn this down to support his case, but I'm struggling to find the technical reasons that we as a committee can point to in policy and say it doesn't meet this statement or it doesn't meet that statement. It wasn't until Councillor Slade spoke up about the quality of the open space that I think we have a shot at going back to look at this to make sure that it meets the current policy. And if not, that quality of the open space could be the technical reason, I suppose, under planning policy that we look to turn this around and say, no thank you, we want to keep the space that we currently have.
Thank you, Jason. I don't know whether that needs an answer. No, I don't think so. John, next, please.
Coming back to what Councillor Jones said earlier,
regarding the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015. It says public bodies need to make sure that when making their decisions, they take into account the impact they could have on people living their lives in Wales in the future, and to look to the long term as well as focusing on now. Well, once we've built on something, there is no future for it. I know this is just a comment, but surely the Future Wellbeing Act was put in there specifically to deal with this kind of application.
Thank you, John. Steve, you want to come back in?
I'd like to bring in the parking as well. That's my next issue. There's one parking short according to the recommendations, and the road is going to be widened. But even then, not every household has got one car. And at the moment, this particular space is usually full of cars. So by proposing the extra space and widening the road, it isn't have any impact on it. It's still going to be a problem with parking. And also, where that particular junction is, there's a lot of traffic comes running back and forth through those Channel View and everything else. So at some point, nobody's going to park their car there because of the speeding coming off the main road. That's the one thing. And the other thing is, where some of these properties are being developed, it's going to have an impact in looking into people's houses in Added Walk and across into Thornhill Road. Mainly way, sorry.
Right, thank you. Perhaps the Highways Officer will come in with a parking problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If members note within the planning application and on the plan on the screen there, you will note that there are two roads which have been widened to 5.5 metres wide. This would allow some on-street parking. The roads were narrower previously, so what we've got to try and look at, really, when we assess a planning application, is first of all, how can we improve things? How can we make things better? And our first stance really was there are existing parking bays there for existing residents. So we persuaded the applicant to still make those available, even though that was in their red line area in effect. So there are parking spaces that remain in there for residents. The roads being widened would allow some on-street parking for residents as well, better provision than they previously had because the roads were narrower. So all in all, for this development of 9 properties, we thought we got some improvement there, to be honest. And bear in mind that when we turn down planning applications based on parking provision, we have to have really good reasons as to why we are doing that. But just to advise members that the properties that are there, the parking for them is in accordance with the parking standards. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, yeah, you can come back.
The problem is that when they're doing this new development and there's one parking space short, not every household got one particular vehicle. Some have 2 or more, and it's going to have an even bigger impact on that particular area of parking, and more than likely increase it and make it worse. Excuse me, and make it worse for the residents there.
Well, you want to come back in now? Right. Are there any questions? Yeah, Faye?
I'd just like to ask, do we know what's going to happen to that awful derelict pub and all that land behind it, or by it, when they're thinking of taking away the beautiful village green for more houses, or most of the village green, which is well used, but they're leaving that awful eyesore over the other side, and those shops which have all those problems could do with redevelopment. Do we know what the plans are for that area?
Right, thank you, Faye. Does anybody know the answer to that?
I believe we have been approached with regard to in pre-application discussion, so we would anticipate an application coming forward for the redevelopment of that site.
Thank you for that. Right, any more questions? Comments from members? Yes, Steve.
With the yew tree still not in the forefront of any movement of building, whatever, I mean, the bungalows down the bottom of the road, it's taken 3 years to get any movement on that. So, you know, we seem to be being developed at a quick rate, like Lanthanum in their particular ward. You know, we've got to come to a point where our green is special to the residents and the community. And they're there, and they don't want any development. They're quite happy anywhere else bar that green.
I think that was a comment, wasn't it, rather than a question? Right. You sure you've asked all your questions? Is anyone prepared to come up with a proposal? Jason?
Yeah, I propose we move against the officer's recommendation on this one. I refuse planning.
Right. Right, we've got loads of seconders. Right, we need reasons now for refusing it. Perhaps I'll bring Richard in and you'll have some.
If you were minded to make, well, you've made that motion to refuse the application, you need to outline your reasons for doing so. What I would suggest is that if there is a seconder and members vote in that way, that you include in your motion, although you've got the grounds for the refusal, if you want officers to work up those reasons for refusal and get wording to report back to the following meeting, then you can include that as part of your motion. Otherwise, we would have to come up with the wording here and now for any decision notice. So it's up to you how you want to approach that.
Well, if Jason is willing to put a deferral in to give the officers time, you know, to put the wording together.
Yes, Chair, absolutely. I think on the basis of the discussion we've had today, the lack of quality open space in the ward is certainly of concern, and that's probably the area that we need to focus on.
You're saying it'll be to the detriment of the existing residents? Okay. Who wants to formally? Alan, were you formally seconding that?
Chair, I was just going to add that the space does have a significant value, and it is of significant quality to the locals. And I think that's the reason why it doesn't satisfy the criteria of policy CF5. And I think we're fully entitled to reject it. Thank you.
Stuart?
Yeah. It's also supported by the Community Council in that particular one as well. I've kept quiet on that, remember, but yeah, that is the discomfort on this as well. I think everybody on the committee is exhibiting that fact. We understand the need for housing, and let everybody be clear about that, but this is the wrong place. We're talking 9 houses, and we're talking, I think John Haller put it rightly about the business, about the well-being of future generations. If we build on this, that's it gone. And I think members are very mindful about this, and I'm a sustainability champion as well for council, and it's important that we are mindful about that. It's gone forever. It sounds a bit like the Asda advert, but at the end of the day, people remember that once you've built on it, we're very mindful that we've got brownfield sites we build. We dearly want it. We've got the pub across the road. We've got those things down there. I mean, Steve and his colleagues in his ward have been very mindful of the fact they want to see more, but in the right place. And I think that's important. Thank you, Jason, for doing that anyway.
Right, thank you, Stuart. I need a formal seconder now. Richard's coming back in for a second.
Just to endorse, if the motion, I'm suggesting that the motion includes, you've given us the grounds for the reasons for refusal, but to word those up in policy terms as robustly as we can, I'm suggesting that as part of your motion, you agree for us to bring back the wording for those reasons at a later committee for you to agree. If you are minded to go down that road.
Yeah, I agree with that, that's fine. Thank you.
I think Jason agreed to that. So we've had a proposal and a seconder. Are you ready to vote on it? This is to refuse the application. Could I have a show of hands, please? Right. Those against? One against. Any abstentions? One abstention. So that planning application has been refused. Right. To add anything, Polly, or it's okay? Right. That application has been refused. We'll go to item 8 on the agenda, which is planning application 17P 0795, construction of 50 residential units, car parking and landscaping and associated works at New Road Farm, Barteg Road, Blaenavon, Pontypool. And it's on pages 115 to 138. And Rebecca McAndrew will give a brief presentation on this. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. The application relates to the New Road Farm residential development in Blaenavon. Oh, thank you. Thanks, I'll make it easier. The application site is located within the boundaries of the World Heritage Site. Back in 2006, consent for the whole of the development of the New Road Farm site was granted for 112 houses. The original developer built 12 properties and then went bankrupt, so the current applicant bought the site back in 2013 and has since been developing the first phase of the site. So if I explain, the current application site is this second phase down here, which is hatched in purple, and this part of the site here is the first phase, which is mostly developed now. So the current application seeks a replan for the second phase of the development. The original approval for this part of the site was for 52 dwellings. The current application in front of us seeks consent for 50 dwellings. The main difference between this scheme and the approved scheme is that there's smaller properties on the site. There's now mainly 2 and 3 bedroom properties. There are more 4 bedroom bigger properties than the original approved scheme. If you look at this, there's a swathe of public open space running through the centre of the development, which connects into the open space in the first phase. This loop road going round. This brown area down the bottom is actually a 3-metre high retaining structure, which is necessary to achieve the levels to build. And then to the rear of the properties, most of the parking is accommodated in parking courts. I'll just show you the previous scheme that was approved, just so I can just point out the similarities. So it's the same sweeping road round. As I said, there's a smaller properties on the new scheme put forward, and there was this road running through the centre where now there'd be parking courts. But generally, it's this very similar layout. This is the proposed house design, very similar and the same to other properties already built in the first phase. Traditional looking properties reflecting the existing site, reflecting the traditional character of properties within Blaenavon, slate roofs, chimneys, sash windows, so attractive properties. So some photos. This is the existing site here now, so you can see that it's currently a building site. This is the phase that we're looking at now. This is looking across at the development from Carmarthen Road. So the top, I don't know whether you can see with the light, but this is the new houses here, and the proposed phase 2 will be further down the valley, so less prominent than the existing houses that have been built. And this is a zoomed in version, so the houses to be built would be down here, and that's for the first phase, second phase down there. So less prominent. And here's just a current street view of the existing development to give you an idea of what the character of the site is and how that will continue through to the next phase. So there's no objections from statutory consultees to the proposals. The highways engineer's happy with the proposed parking levels and the layout. Conservation officers happy with the proposed house design and layout. There's a 5% affordable housing requirement in Blenavon, but 5 dwellings were developed as part of the first phase of the site, which meets that need, so there's no need to require that in this for this application. There is an £81,200 leisure contribution. We're proposing to have section 106 to incorporate a viability review at a suitable stage within the application, within the development process, so we can assess the viability of providing that contribution in respect of more up-to-date house prices as more houses are sold on the site. So we're happy as officers with the scheme and recommend approval subject to section 106. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Are there any questions? Can I have Janet first, please, and then you can...
My only concern, which has already been addressed, was the Section 106 funding, which is, is causing concern among some of us. But if we do go ahead with our recommendation, I would be really happy.
Right, thank you. Steve, do you want to come in now?
Yeah, sorry, when you got a breakdown of how many bed houses you are, on the third one, they got 7, either 3 or 4 bed. Now, underneath that, you got 3, 4 bed houses. Is there any particular reason why they're doing 7? Haven't they made a decision whether they're going to be 3 or 4? Or...
Can you answer that, Rebecca?
Each one.
I assume that extra room would be an interchangeable space. That would be my assumption.
It was just because they hadn't decided how big they wanted it.
No, we've got specific designs. So some of the properties are split levels.
Any other questions? Jason?
Just a general one, really. As we increase the population of places in the north of the borough, such as Blaenavon, are we working with Welsh Government to improve the transport links between the north and the south of the borough?
That's a really big question. And I think the Highway Officer is going to be brave.
If I could answer that, this really big question. There was a North Torfaen study done several years ago, and we've managed to secure some pockets of funding to carry out some improvements. But members concern the same concerns that I have with access to the north of the borough. At peak times it can be quite difficult without spending substantial amounts of money on an Abersychan bypass or wherever, and looking at junctions onto that particular road. It's awful difficult to see what you can do, and the costs are huge. We are minded about the improvements that are necessary. It came out as part of the study. So yeah, I share your concerns. A point noted, it is a big question, but there are no easy answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry you can't have... this has been going on for years, hasn't it, this debate? So, Stuart, next, please.
If I'm not incorrect, that is just below the Blaenavon Railway, isn't it? There is actually the cycleway up there, and the 2 buses that go up there. One is best bus in Wales, which is the X24, every 10 minutes, and the other one coming down is the other bus company, which is pretty regular. So during the daytime, it's pretty well served. I might get shot down by but there's a pretty good bus service going up there, because some of these houses are offered on, the other houses are offered on Home Seeker at the moment. I was going to ask the question whether some of these houses were being registered as social landlord, because the other part of the development is offered on Home Seeker. I know that, but for other way, I just wondered whether they were being offered as rentals.
The application is actually just for market housing. I think 20 of the houses have been designed as DQR standards, so there would be the possibility of them being taken over by a registered social landlord, but I don't think there's any agreement in place.
The other aspect of this question was the affordability, if that was the case, because obviously you know, I think it's a valid point to ask about that, because if people, one of the things to make, the question about buses transport up there is a very valid one, because if people are coming up and down is obviously how you get to work. We obviously hope that sooner or later we get the new metro system or some version, the bus equivalent of that up there. It's a good point, I think.
Right, thank you, Stuart. Yeah. Any other comments, questions? Richard?
Communication problems aside, I'd just like to welcome the confidence that the developer has in Blaenavon. I mean, there was a time, say 25 years ago, when no private developer would even look at Blaenavon, give it a second glance. So I am welcoming the confidence the developer has on this site.
Thank you for that, Richard. Any other comments, questions? Is anyone ready to propose?
Yes, Chair. I'll move the officer's recommendation.
Right, it's been proposed and seconded to approve this application. Would you like to give me a show of hands? Right. That looks unanimous. This application has been approved. Thank you. Right, we go to agenda item 9, which is planning application 17P 0802, demolition of existing building and construction of new petrol filling station and associated works including new sales building, underground fuel tanks, fuel dispensers, external plant lighting and hard surfacing at Woodland Road Service Station, the highway across the Caerleog, Cwm Bran. And Norman Jones is going to give us a presentation on this. Thank you, Norman.
Thank you, Chair. This site sits on the junction of Woodland Road and the highway. It's an existing petrol filling station, although it hasn't been used for quite a number of years as a petrol filling station, but that is its authorised use with an existing retail kiosk associated with it and some workshops. The proposal is to redevelop it. That's the existing kiosk, and the canopy is shown outlined. Existing canopy, existing kiosk. The proposal is to construct a new build kiosk and retail shop. The dimensions for this are 40 metres by 21.5 metres, increasing the area from its existing 8.5 metres by 15.5 metres, giving an overall retail area within the building of 225 square metres. A new canopy will be erected with a 5 metre clearance. It's proposed to renew the petrol tanks and a general redevelopment. We have received objections which are listed in the report. However, in terms of planning policy, we see this as a redevelopment of an existing rundown site with the development of this new build facility, which will have retail on the ground floor with some ancillary accommodation, office accommodation on the first floor. This is the current position of the site, fairly run down. The new building will be coming close to the boundaries. However, we consider the impact on residents to be acceptable, and we've not received any objections in relation to the proximity of the buildings. And that's it at the moment, and that's the junction of Woodland Road with the highway. You will see that there is conditions proposed in restricting the floor space to 225 square metres, and that is to comply with the LDP policy in relation to retail, new retail outlets. And in condition 13 on the report, it is proposed to amend that to include the servicing and deliveries in the operational hours restriction, so that the condition 13 currently states that operational hours for the development would be restricted to 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. Mondays to Sundays, and if members are mindful to approve, we would include servicing and deliveries within that operational hours in the wording. On balance, we consider the objections. However, we consider that the redevelopment of a rundown site with a new build development which will serve the local population to be of benefit, and we recommended approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Norman. Right. Steve, you got a question?
Yeah, that junction is quite a busy junction, isn't it? But also the school is being built right opposite. Is that going to have an impact on the the amount of vehicles and the demolition people and everything? Because it's going to have a big impact on the traffic that actually travels through that road.
Highways officer coming in now with that, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing that I take into account here is that it's got an existing use in effect. It's had that use for many years, and those uses intermixed before as they will do. The question is how much more will be as part of this development. Because of the site is quite constrained, there's not a lot that can go on there really. It's a shop, as was before, albeit a bit bigger. There was a workshop on there before with trips generated by that workshop, in and out cars, which won't be there any longer. And there is a petrol facility, and local facilities like this should be in local communities, to be honest. I take your point that there is a school near there. It is a busy junction, but this have worked quite satisfactory over the years without, I looked through the accident record, without any personal injury accident record attributed to this filling station. So yeah, I understand that where there are schools, there are always going to be mixes of children and mixes of businesses and mixes of traffic generated by houses. But given that there was a use on this site similar to what will be, that harm won't be significantly increased by this development, and that's the way we need to look at it from a highway standpoint.
Yeah. Can I come back on that? Yeah. I was more on the point that when demolishing it, there's going to be some serious big equipment there to bring it down, while the big equipment within the school environment as well.
Sorry, Councillor, I didn't pick up on that point, but yeah, as with any development site, there will be demolitions and there will be building operations. Likewise, the school itself is going through a significant building operation at the moment, and it's down to the sites to manage this in conjunction with us as a highway authority as best we can, and to try and manage the movements. So yeah, always concerns when there are building operations with this. To be honest, I think the building operation will be quite short compared to what some building operations are. Share your concerns, but building operations always go on adjacent to highways. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. Stuart, you want to come in?
Yeah, I share similar concerns because that garage I don't think has been used for about 6-7 years, maybe more longer. And we got a garage down bottom, where is it, by the lights. There's one over by Morrison's. Got that as a triangulation of garages. I know we don't consider that as planning authority, but it's also going to be a to late shop type of place. It's getting bigger, so it'd be interesting to know what's in there, because then you're going to have the school kids going over there as well, which then consideration about them going over the road and what they get in there. You've also got the store up the road. I mean, I know this quite well because my allotment's over by there. That's how I know that one. Obviously some concerns raised by the co-op and the place up the road. So the other question I was going to ask, because obviously how many pumps are they going to? I remember last time they had about 4 in there. Was it 3, something like that? Comparison with the other garages is quite big. It's an idea of about stuff coming. This particular garage always worried me, and in conjunction with the school kids, and all that parking that happens there, because it's quite lethal, is they come in one corner and out the other, and you've got stuff going down the road. So there's concerns about late stuff, in which I noticed you restrict the time to 11 o'clock, I think it was. So in effect, it's a late shot. There's other stuff about cars coming in and out. You get a lot of that up there, because I remember seeing that happen last time. And how you mitigate against that sort of nonsense that happens when you come off highway and down. You used to be able to see that happening. So there's some concerns I have about that. And then the kids going across the road from school, obviously how we can control that, because it was quite dangerous at times. And the other problem they have there is the parents who are parking down there and the entrance blocking, which is the other favourite one. Few questions there, Paul.
Please, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there was a few questions there.
No, I'm sorry, I'm just
it might take me a little while, but as part of the school redevelopment, the Woodland Road access will now be the main pedestrian access into the school site. The main vehicular access to the school site will be shifted away from here, and it will be down County Hall roundabout. So, in effect, school-associated vehicles have been taken away from this particular area, and the pedestrian movements have been split in two as well. So you get pedestrian movements from this end coming off Woodland Road, from the other end coming in by County Hall. So, in effect, you've got a reduction of vehicles in this particular area as a consequence of the school redevelopment, and you've split the pedestrian movements in this area. So theoretically it should get better, but theoretically doesn't always happen. So yeah, I share your concerns, and there always will be mixes of pedestrians. Now, what are we doing for pedestrians as a consequence of this school development? There will be a pedestrian crossing located now on Woodland Road, which will assist with crossing movements for pedestrians. They used to crowd out of the school and go everywhere at one time. So hopefully this will channel them to one point, which should make it safer. I think as a consequence of the school development, you'll remember that there was a long conversation on trying to segregate out the movements of the pedestrians and the vehicles, which I think we've successfully managed to do. So, yeah, there always will be concern at a particular site where there is a school. But if you think of the operating times of this, the school is busy early in the morning, is busy mid-afternoon. There is nothing associated with the school on a significant amount of the operating times of this particular development. With regards to your concerns about cars going in and out of the development, I mean, primarily what you look at is if they got sufficient visibility that they can see as they pull in and out, and it is sufficient. There is two accesses into the site, but that helps in getting a tanker into the site to unload and load as it did previously. I think the number of pumps there are probably the same as what there was before. And I take your point about there being other petrol filling stations within the near vicinity, but local facilities sometimes for people that like to go local. So that facility is there. If they go to the shop, it may encourage them to use petrol, to buy petrol. It's about linked trips. It's about sustainability in your local communities, local facilities for local people in local areas where they don't have to travel so far. So it's all a big mix of things. And from a highway standpoint, we couldn't see that there were several benefits with the school changing. This had an existing use, so we went with it in effect. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think Norman wants to come in now. Thank you.
I did say about the crossing going by the school, didn't I? Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just coming back on Councillor Evans's point in terms of the demolition, just to point out, we are proposing a construction demolition management plan as condition for in relation to your concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Right, any more questions? Jason again.
Thank you, Chair. I very much welcome this development. I think it's an excellent piece of news that somebody is willing to reinvigorate the petrol station. I certainly welcome the competition. I think it's a good sign, good visual sign, that the economy is slowly improving and more and more businesses want to come to Torfaen. If it does have the additional benefit of alleviating the traffic at Morrison's petrol station, that roundabout there, then I think that's only a good thing also. But the question I had, you've more or less answered, in that, like moths to a flame, children will stream over that road to go and get various confectionery items. So if the pedestrian crossing is being placed there, then I think, then for me, that certainly mitigates a lot of the risk of any injury or accident.
Thank you. Don't think that needs an answer. Any other questions? Richard?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. A thought has just occurred to me. There's another question for the Highways Officer. If commuters come off the A442 to use this filling station, which is very close to that front road, and just thinking about the volume of traffic at the time that the school children are being dropped off, has that been taken into consideration?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. When we look at applications, we look at the overall highway network, which would include the trunk road in this particular instance. I mean, by its very nature, filling stations like this are not big attractors for trunk road traffic. What they generally tend to do is fill up before they get on the trunk road network, because they're primarily trunk roads to distribute big amounts of traffic. So they fill up generally before they go anywhere. And they would normally fill up at the cheaper places. I'm not saying anything about the cost of this, but that's what generally tends to happen. If this does pick up some trunk road traffic, to me personally, that as a highway officer, that isn't a real significant issue. But I would say that I would think that this is primarily for local people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Anybody want to propose? You're moving it for approval?
Yes.
Right, it's been seconded. Right, you ready to vote? This is for approval. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's unanimous. So this application has been approved. That is the last item on the agenda. I thank you for your attendance and I close the meeting.